He fired me right there in front of half the engineering floor, all because I wouldn't put in unpaid overtime. Then, like it was some kind of prize, he handed me a non-compete agreement, looked me dead in the eye and said, "That means you don't touch a keyboard for the next 11 months. I didn't argue, didn't break down. I just gathered my stuff, slipped my inventor certification into my bag, and walked out without even glancing over my shoulder. What he didn't know, that was the last call he'd ever make without my shadow hanging over it. 3 weeks before that whole performance, the pink slip stunt, the smug legal flex, I was still the quiet guy tucked away in the server room. That's how I liked it. Dual monitors humming, deployment logs streaming like scripture down the screen. A pot of black coffee, noise-canceling headphones, and a clean terminal prompt. That was peace. While the others were busy chasing promotions and brown-nosing their way through performance reviews, I was quietly building rock-solid systems. Fixing pipelines Rylan didn't even know were broken. Half the code he flaunted in boardrooms still had my tags buried deep in the branches. And I left them there. On purpose. Then came Varnatrix's big move. They brought in Rylan Fisk. Harvard tie. LinkedIn guru. Corporate buzzword machine. The kind of guy who whiteboards more than he codes, and never actually erases anything. First thing out of his mouth? Tech isn't about code, it's about optics. Like he was delivering a TED Talk. I watched from my usual spot, back corner, next to the locked cabinet only I had the key to, and listened while he told my team we needed to think like a startup. He stopped at my desk, gave the notebooks I always kept a sideways glance. Those were filled with API sketches, shell command chains, handwritten systems notes, and said, "Vintage. Are those like for decoration?" Without looking up, I said, "Only thing more permanent than code is paper. You'll get it eventually." He gave this smug little laugh like I was some relic on display. "We'll modernize that out," he said. Then strutted off toward DevOps like he just invented the wheel. Quick pause, real talk. 97% of you watch these stories without subscribing. If you're still listening, if this story's got your attention, hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. Helps the team more than you know. Thanks. Anyway, first week under Fisk was pure chaos. He kicked out 2 senior engineers for bad attitude, just because they pushed back on his CI changes. Forced us to rewrite all commit messages to fit some branding nonsense he heard on a podcast. When I quietly warned him that his new deployment flow was going to break our rollback triggers, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Stick to keyboard hygiene." Keyboard hygiene. Like I was a toddler smearing peanut butter on a laptop. That's when I started logging everything, his comments, his edits, every decision, every name left off an invite. Because here's the thing, while he was out there playing cosplay CTO, I'd already done the real work. And I'd been ready for this moment for 2 years. Back in 2021, our founder Marshall personally asked me to lead a quiet side project. Goal was to optimize multi-tenant orchestration for enterprise clients. No deadline, no micromanagement, just build it right. So I did. Nights, weekends, no pay bumps, just me, root access, and a whole lot of Red Bull. I didn't care about credit, didn't chase titles, but I tracked every commit under my name. And when it finally worked, when it cut load times by 63% and slashed costs for our clients, it got folded into the company's core stack. They called it the Fisk engine, named after him. He'd never even laid eyes on the architecture doc. But I had something more valuable than a flashy title. I had author certificates. I had integration logs. And tucked neatly inside one of the binders Rylan once mocked during a town hall, my official inventor certificate, filed under the state's Digital Engineering Act. Just sitting there quietly waiting, same as me. Rylan thought this was some kind of corporate turf war, a battle fought with PowerPoints and buzzwords. But I wasn't fighting a war. I was posted up in a clock tower watching, recording, waiting for the exact moment he'd screw up. Publicly. On record. And when that moment came, when he tried to fire me with that fake smile and that rehearsed line about tough decisions, he didn't just mess up. He activated a clause he hadn't even bothered to read. But I had. And I'd flagged it the day it became law. First thing Monday, Rylan blasts a Slack message. Architecture committee refresh. Invite sent. I checked twice. No ping. I opened my calendar, nothing. Just like that, I'm cut from the very committee I helped build, The one I'd shared through every major system redesign and high-stakes rollback over the last 3 years. No explanation, just a new invite list stacked with his coffee circle cronies and 2 interns he once called codefluencers. I don't flinch. Just open my personal file labeled Insurance and drop in a new bullet under Structural Omission Patterns. Date. Timestamp. Noted. I list the committee removal, the affected systems, and impacted code branches. Then I sip my coffee and run a deployment diff. It confirms what I already suspected. Their so-called refresh introduced a memory leak. By noon, Ryland's pacing the hallway with a sales lead, gesturing like he's pitching to NASA. I hear him through the glass. She's great at maintenance, but we need innovation at the top. Vision. Execution. Maintenance. That's what he calls 3 years of designing the orchestration core that powers our entire platform. That's what he calls the rollback logic I wrote that once saved a Fortune 500 client from losing $1.4 million on a bad integration. Again, I don't respond. I just highlight the word maintenance in my log and file it under narrative manipulation. Then I pull up the statute I'd bookmarked weeks ago. It was tucked into a workforce realignment bill passed quietly at the end of Q4. Section 3A. V. Non-compete agreements rendered unenforceable if the terminated party is the documented originator of intellectual property under active licensing. Clean. Specific. Surgical. I emailed myself the full PDF. Twice. Later that day, around 2:15, Ryland strolls by my desk with one of the DevRel managers, still riding high on his own ego. He notices my row of binders, black, worn, each labeled by quarter and component. Taps one with his knuckle. "These antiques yours?" I look up. "Yep." He grins. "What, Google Docs too futuristic for you? Paper lasts longer than your tenure," I reply. Flat. No smile. He lets out a half laugh, more for the manager than for me. "We'll be digitizing everything soon. Welcome to the cloud." The DevRel guy laughs, kind of awkward. I don't. I just log the moment. Public derision of documentation practices, 2:17 p.m. 2 days later, something shifts. Not inside the company, but outside. An email shows up in the shared client liaison inbox. Subject line. Varnitrix Q2 orchestration inquiry. The sender? Lead engineer from our biggest renewal client. There's $220 million riding on that deal. They were asking about our orchestration schema, specifically the legacy tolerances and how the system handles overrides under multi-tenant compression. But the real kicker? The email was addressed to Ryland, and I was CC'd with a direct note. "We'd like confirmation from the original system architect." So I waited. Ryland fires back with a fluff paragraph full of corporate word salad. Something about agile structure and forward-leaning compatibility assurance. Total nonsense. One skim and it's clear he's dodging. The client replies short and cold. "Could Marin please clarify the following?" That's when I see it, the first visible crack. The outside world is starting to notice what the internal politics tried to bury. My name. My fingerprints on the system. My silence where it matters. Ryland forwards me the thread with just, "Handle this. Don't overcomplicate." So I do. I reply with 2 tight paragraphs. I include specific subsystem references, commit IDs, override logic justifications, and a reminder that all related paths are documented under CertAuth.me, per their service agreement. No extra flair. Just clarity. My signature's there. Doesn't need to shout. Me. Marin Ellery. Signed, archived, backed by documentation. 10 minutes later, their head of compliance replies, "Thank you, Marin. We'll defer to your documentation on all future renewal reviews." I star the email. Not for the pat on the back, but because I know what's coming. That was just the first. More will follow. I didn't build the orchestration engine for recognition. I built it to withstand chaos, and it knows exactly who created it. Thursday morning, 10 minutes before our cross-team integration briefing, I spotted it. Not a bug, worse. A silent flaw. Hidden deep in the modified rollback loop from Ryland's refresh. It wasn't something that would crash the platform. No, this was more insidious. It would quietly deprioritize timeout alerts under specific multi-tenant loads, delaying failovers just long enough to breach our SLA contracts. Could affect hundreds, maybe thousands, A slow digital bleed out. I wrote it all up. 3 pages. Printed it. Dropped it in the left sleeve of my meeting binder: code sample, logic trace, proof chain, and risk summary. I slid it into my folder like a surgeon tucking away a scalpel. The conference room's packed. One side's all our internal leads, engineering, sales. The other's the client's renewal team. 4 execs, 2 engineers, and 1 liaison who watches everything like he's logging footage for court. Rylan shows up late, sleeves rolled, phone in hand, acting like he owns the room. All right, folks. Let's align on the orchestration roadmap before next week's sign-off. About 30 minutes in, he tosses it over to me. Marin, quick overview of the legacy flow for the client. Keep it high level. So I walk them through it. Schema overview, top-down triggers, auto fallback behavior, SLA logic, all clean. Then I shift. I don't drop alarms. I don't dramatize. I just ease into it. There's a new logic condition here, I say, pointing to the chart. Line 702 in the orchestration handler. If 3 or more tenants exceed the fallback threshold at the same time, the rollback delay tolerances can stack without throwing an error. It doesn't trigger a crash, but Rylan slams into the sentence like a truck. We don't need junior dev angst in front of paying clients. It's not just what he says, it's how. Loud. Sharp. Disrespect on full display. The whole room goes quiet. The sales manager coughs into his sleeve. One of the client engineers froze, pen still in midair. Across the table, the technical liaison, Jada, leaned in ever so slightly. She didn't say a word. Just watched. Her eyes were locked on me, not Rylan. I didn't push back. Didn't say a thing. I calmly reached into my binder, flipped to the red-tabbed page I'd marked in advance, section 3V of the State Employment Code. The clause outlining exemption from non-competes for intellectual property originators who get terminated. My thumb landed right on the paragraph as Rylan kept spewing phrases like modern agility and cloud-native resilience. Probably cribbed off some trendy blog post. Jada was still watching me. Not Rylan. Me. I tilted the binder ever so slightly. Just enough for her to read the statute heading. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Ink and silence said enough. The meeting went on without me. Rylan waved his hands, beamed about the new stack, tossed around praise like party favors. Someone joked about finally retiring the old scripts. A few people laughed. The clients didn't. Once the room began to clear, I gathered my things slowly. Jada lingered by the door. One of the client engineers, young guy, glasses, good posture, leaned over and quietly asked, "You wrote this engine, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. He gave a small nod, like that was all he needed. Because it was. The code knew. The paper trail knew. And now they did too. It started with a perfectly neutral email. Polite. Professional. Nothing flashy. Just precise enough to land with weight. Per our ongoing renewal review, we'd appreciate the opportunity to clarify certain historical architecture assumptions. Would you be open to a brief one-on-one? No CCs. No smiley faces. No calendar link. Just a direct message from Delane Franklin, senior legal advisor for the renewal client. His name had been buried in the original contracts from years back when I helped map their tenant architecture. And clearly he remembered. I replied with a single line. Available this Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Let me know if you prefer Teams or Signal. He chose Signal. The call started with the usual formalities. Didn't stay there long. Delane cut to it. We've reviewed the orchestration deployment flow and traced several key behaviors back to the original architecture docs. Your name comes up repeatedly, on commits, design annotations, even the cert routing logic. I confirmed it, plain and direct. Yes. I authored the orchestration core under Marshall's Sandbox directive. It was built during unpaid development hours on company equipment. All commit signatures and timestamps are documented. The cert routing follows Engineering IP Statute 2.3b, as defined under state law. He let me finish. Didn't interrupt. I opened the binder, the same one Rylan mocked, and read off the sections tied to my original schema. I also shared a PDF archive with scanned design notes, a notarized affidavit from our former lead systems architect verifying authorship, and a copy of the patent addendum Marshall had me draft in case leadership ever got creative. This wasn't self-defense. This was clarity. By the end of the call, Delane's tone had shifted. Not friendlier but sharper. More focused. He thanked me. Not just for the materials, but for the precision and professional restraint. That's when I knew. The curtain had been pulled back. They saw it now. Not the title on my org chart but the weight behind it. The foundation they'd all been standing on without realizing it had my signature carved into the stone. Back at HQ, Rylan was still parading through the open floor plan like he just invented Kubernetes. He pulled the team into a surprise all hands and threw out a line like he was dropping gospel. We're finally streamlining the dev pool. Too much legacy clutter. We need velocity, not nostalgia. He waved vaguely toward the back of the room, right where my chair sat empty. I hadn't shown up to one of his meetings in weeks. If people aren't evolving, they're just roadblocks, he added, full of smug certainty. Someone clapped. I didn't check who. Didn't matter. Because while he was busy declaring war on legacy, I was sitting in a meeting with the client's technical compliance lead. They'd found inconsistencies in the cert routing structure. Specifically, why every license chain filtered through a user listed as Mellery UT, tied directly to my employee ID. I gave them a simple answer. That's the master credential the engine won't run without. That was all they needed. No diagrams. No slides. They were already connecting the dots. Behind Rylan's noise, the legal teams were drawing up a different narrative. One built on timestamps, signatures, and original architecture files. A timeline that didn't cast me as an extra, cast me as the source. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. The room smelled like too much cologne and burnt coffee. Classic pre-renewal energy. Rylan had reserved the top conference suite, laid out catered snacks, and printed a laminated agenda that nobody asked for. Across the top in bold blue, Integration Master Sync, Future-proofing Varnitrix. He stood near the head of the table, sleeves up, tie loose, putting on that whole too busy to care look, like he was personally dragging innovation across the finish line. I took a seat near the far end, out of the spotlight but not out of play. I placed one folder on the table, no label. Pulled my hair back into a loose twist. No laptop, no phone. Just a pen and a badge clipped to the folder. The one Rylan never once asked about. The client team came in sharp and fast. Jada entered first. When she saw me, she gave a quick nod, not warm but firm. Respect. Then came Delane, their legal lead. And last, the investor. Tall, lean, slate gray blazer, wearing a watch worth more than the car I drive. Rylan lit up like he was hosting a product launch. Welcome, welcome. Can't wait to show you what we've done with your infrastructure this quarter. He launched straight into the buzzword buffet. Decoupled containers, synergized data fabrics, predictive elasticity. A pile of fancy jargon that meant absolutely nothing without the orchestration layer to glue it together. And that layer, still mine. 15 minutes in, Jada raised her hand. Calm, precise. We want to confirm that the engine changes still meet the licensing integrity standards outlined in the original compliance package. Rylan flashed his practiced grin. Of course. My team's cleaned up a lot of the old logic. We're modernizing the stack while staying within, authorship tolerances. That's when I spoke. Could you define authorship tolerances? He turned toward me, eyebrows up like he couldn't believe I dared to interrupt the show. Here to audit my work again, Marin? He said with a chuckle loud enough to echo. Do you even know how enterprise integration works? The room shifted. Just slightly. Like someone had closed a window in the middle of a hot summer. Sucked the air right out. You could feel it. Jada leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Delane stopped tapping his pen. I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. I just reached for the folder in front of me, unclipped my badge and slid it across the table. It wasn't a company ID. It was the inventor certification. Black laminate. State seal. Embedded QR code. At the bottom under the barcode, my full name. Marin Ellery, inventor of record. Statute 2.3 BIP orchestration system. License reference ID. 440709. Silence. Jada picked it up first. Read every line. Her face didn't shift, but her posture did. Back straighter, focus sharper. She passed it to Delane. He blinked once. Then again. then handed it to the investor. He studied it in silence, then turned to Rylan. Do you know who she is? It wasn't a dramatic question. It was precise, like a scalpel cutting through the noise. Rylan opened his mouth, but nothing came out right away. Then came the nervous laugh. Of course, she was part of the original, implementation team. Not implementation, I said quietly. Calm, steady. Architect. The investor placed the badge back on the table, face up. We're going to need to revisit your compliance briefings, he said flatly, not even glancing at Rylan. No one asked me to say another word. They didn't need to. Everything I had to say had already been said years ago. In the code. In the diagrams. In the signed commits and certified schematics that everyone had ignored, until now. The air in that room shifted. I didn't just change the dynamic. I rewrote it. Delane didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That's how you know a lawyer means business, when the room gets quieter, not louder. We cannot proceed without the certifying inventor's approval, he said, adjusting his glasses with a kind of slow, deliberate clarity that sliced through Rylan's facade like piano wire through soft butter. Rylan let out this jittery, too-high laugh that sounded like anxiety trying to cosplay confidence. With all due respect, he started, which in corporate speak always means a disrespectful bomb is coming. Marin's a solid contributor, sure, but she's not the linchpin here. The system works with or without her. She's replaceable. Just a coder. The temperature dropped. Delane didn't even blink. She's not just anything. She's the registered inventor under Statute 2.3b. Her digital signature is embedded in the licensing chain. If you tamper with that, you void your compliance structure, and the entire stack becomes non-compliant under the renewal agreement. The investor turned slowly, like he just realized someone had forged his signature on $1 million deal. Let me make sure I'm hearing this correctly, he said, voice like a steel trap. You've been altering the architecture, sidelining the certifying inventor, and excluding her from critical decisions, while her name legally licenses the product we're about to reinvest in? Rylan blinked. That's not. I mean, she wasn't the original codebase, it's legacy. She holds the license, the investor snapped. Rising to his feet. Cut her out and the product violates compliance. That's not legacy. That's breach of contract. Rylan turned, looking for support. Any support. But none came. Not from Jada, whose arms were now crossed tight and whose face made it clear she was finished pretending he had a clue. Not from the product manager, who suddenly found the label on her water bottle very, very interesting. Not even the junior dev Rylan, always dragged into meetings like a human accessory, spoke up for him. The kid just stared down at his notepad, like maybe if he focused hard enough, he could vanish with his job still intact. And me? I didn't say a word. Didn't shift in my seat. Didn't raise an eyebrow. I simply adjusted the corner of my badge, still lying face up in front of me, and let the silence do all the work. Because Rylan's kingdom, the meetings, the buzzwords, the puffed-up titles, was a paper fortress. And it had been standing on an engine I designed line by line. His authority. All optics. Mine was in the foundation. And when the foundation speaks, no one cares about the window dressing. From that point on, no one in the room directed questions at him. They asked me. By 1:47 p.m., Rylan's name disappeared from the renewal Slack channel. No goodbye message. No announcement. Just gone like a bad variable, quietly garbage collected from memory. The channel header changed too, from CTO-led briefings to Client Alignment Coordination Lead, M. Ellery. At 2:12 p.m., I got an email from HR. Subject line: Performance Alignment Discussion. The message was vague. Hi Marin. Leadership would like to schedule a brief sync regarding your current role and strategic positioning. Please indicate availability. I didn't reply. Not yet. Let them sit in the uncertainty they created. At 3:09 p.m., Varnatrix's founder Marshall Gray came back from his 3-week tech conference run in Singapore. I only realized because he walked past the server room I was working in, stopped cold and stared at a printout in his hand. It was the Integration License Index. He looked at the paper, looked at me, and muttered under his breath. How did he not know she built the engine? I didn't respond. He wasn't talking to me. At 3:46 p.m., The renewal client submitted a formal request through the vendor portal. Final integration walkthrough to be led by certifying inventor Marin Ellery. Mandatory. No alternatives. No substitutions. Just me. So I pulled the binder. The same one Rylan used to laugh at. Called it a relic. Tapped it during meetings like it was full of knitting patterns or grocery lists. I set it down in the conference room, flipped it open to section 4.2, service orchestration variance handling, and got started. No screen share. No slide deck. No flashy charts. Just paper. Diagrams. My voice. Steady. Precise. The client team followed every word. No interruptions. No sideways glances. Jada asked 2 questions, both answered with a turn of the page, hand-inked workflows circled in red. When I pointed out the logic path that rerouted failovers during simultaneous tenant spikes, the same one Rylan once called over-engineering, Delane leaned back and said one word. Elegant. The whole walkthrough took 42 minutes. 37 minutes later, the approval email came in. Renewal recommendation approved. Every architecture condition met. Compliance certifications validated. I closed the binder, clipped it shut, then walked out before anyone could clap or compliment or spin it into a PR win. I didn't need applause. I didn't need Rylan's job title. I didn't even need to be invited to the next leadership summit. What I needed and what I earned was clarity. Real, undeniable, paper trail clarity. That I built this thing. That they tried to write me out. And that the system, my system, refused to run without me. No speeches. No revenge monologues. Just correction. Quiet. And final. The deposition took place in one of those rooms designed to make you feel small. No windows. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights that flickered like they were losing a fight. It smelled like overbrewed coffee and corporate dread. A space where reputations don't crash. They just rot in silence. I wore gray. No makeup, no earrings. Just a black leather folder and a pen that had already signed off on 3 resignations. None of them mine. Across from me sat Rylan. Fresh shave, stiff collar, and the jittery energy of someone trying to impersonate confidence. His lawyer was a corporate partner from some downtown firm, armed with too many initials after his name and not nearly enough strategy. He didn't make eye contact once. Let's begin, said the company's counsel as he pressed record. The first 30 minutes were a performance. Rylan's lawyer tried to spin my exit as aggressive, unprofessional, and in direct violation of the non-compete I'd signed years ago. The irony practically wrote itself. The guy who worked overtime to erase my authorship was now trying to claim I owed him rights over where I typed next. They pulled up a screenshot of my LinkedIn update. Technical systems consultant, contracted role, Riser Group. Rylan smirked like he just caught me tagging code in someone else's repo. I waited. And then came the moment they weren't ready for. The company's own counsel, Bryce, I think, flipped to a packet I recognized the second I saw the red tab. It was the updated employment law brief. The one I'd flagged months ago. Printed. Highlighted. Filed under a tab labeled Trigger. He began reading aloud, flat and calm. Per Employment Statute 3A, v. Effective August 1st, any individual who is both 1. The documented originator of active intellectual property under enterprise license, and 2. Involuntarily terminated during a reduction or reclassification period, shall be exempt from previously enforceable non-compete clauses. He stopped, mid-sentence, still staring at the page. Then he looked up, slow and deliberate, and turned to Rylan. On what exact date? He asked, his voice a little thinner now. Did you terminate Ms. Ellery? Rylan blinked. I think it was in May. Or maybe June. I answered, steady as always. June 3rd. 11:12 a.m. Pacific. I have the termination email. Would you like me to forward it? Bryce didn't say anything for a few beats. He just exhaled, looked down at the papers in front of him like they betrayed him. Then he turned back to the recorder. For the record, based on the termination date and the updated statute's enactment, the non-compete claim is no longer enforceable. Additionally, the company may be in breach of inventor protection compliance under state IP provision 2.3b. And then, silence. Not the empty kind, the kind that buzzes, that crackles in the corners of the room louder than shouting. Rylan squirmed in his seat. Mouth opening, closing. Nothing landing. His lawyer leaned back like someone had just slipped a grenade under the table and pulled the pin. I didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. I just opened my folder to the next tab and waited. Because this was never about payback. It was about proof. And the one thing more permanent than titles or smug little smirks, or even curated LinkedIn headlines, was code. And the law that finally caught up to the truth it carried. The lawsuit didn't even last long enough for the coffee to cool. 47 minutes, start to finish. Once the statute had been read into the record and the timeline confirmed, Ryland's legal team immediately asked for a recess. 10 minutes later they returned, heads lower, voices tight. They submitted a 2-line withdrawal. All claims against Ms. Ellery are hereby dropped with prejudice. No further action will be pursued. The court reporter didn't even blink. She just marked the time and shut off the mic. I walked out without a word. No handshake. No glance back. Ryland didn't follow. I don't think he could stand. By the next week, the renewal client had finalized their new contract. Not with Varnitrix. With me. Direct consulting agreement. 18-month retainer. Triple my old salary. No non-compete clause. No buried restrictions. Full control over architecture decisions, licensing continuity, and execution oversight. And in bold, dead center in the contract, one line that made me pause and smile. Technical oversight to remain solely with M. Ellery for duration of system lifecycle. 3 days after that, Ryland's board held an emergency session. I didn't go, but people talk. They used the phrase operational negligence in the formal dismissal. Internally, they started calling it the Ellery incident. His badge was deactivated before his goodbye email even made it to the outbox. I never responded to the HR follow-up. Just let the silence sit where it belonged. After all, that was the only thing that ever told the truth at Varnitrix. A week later, I was at a quiet client appreciation dinner hosted by the renewal firm. Low lighting, white tablecloths, soft jazz humming somewhere near the ceiling. I ended up seated beside a junior analyst, bright kid new to systems with the kind of curiosity that hasn't been trained out yet. Halfway through dessert, he leaned in like he wasn't sure if the question was allowed. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "How do you stay so calm through all of it? The exclusion, the lawsuit, the everything." I took a sip of tea. No dramatics. Just the answer. Because the code remembers who wrote it. He blinked, then nodded slowly, like something settled into place. After dinner, I made my way through the firm's main office on my way to the elevator. Their tech wing was sleek, glass walls, polished concrete, cool lighting. As I passed reception, something caught my eye. A single black frame hung on a wall with no label, no spotlight. Inside it, my original state-issued inventor certification. Matte black background. Clean white border. No plaque. No caption. They hadn't asked for permission to hang it. They didn't need to, because that frame wasn't about ego, or credit, or revenge. It was about recognition. In the one language that actually matters. Quiet. Permanent. Real.